All right, figure illustration. I've got my wash brush. Here's my final drawing that I finally got all put together. So what I'm going to do is attempt to kind of put my first washes in. The idea is you want to get some of your basic colors, think about your color comps and what those look like, and go ahead and start to influence that. So my idea is I'm going to make this more of kind of like a sunset behind our main figure. And because of that, we're going to kind of have that idea of a dark portrait on light. I think I'm still going to have some lights catching him in places, but for the most part, that's my concept. So I've got a big 3/4 inch wash brush and get that nice and wet. I can't find my white, so I've got to use some liquid white acrylic. So I'm going to put a little bit of that there, and I'm going to mix it with a lot of water and a little bit of yellow first. I am going to let this go right up and on top of the figure early on in this wash. So the sunset's going to be down here, so I'm going to just lay this in. You can catch a little bit of the blade over there. Get this nice and wet. Maybe a little bit. It's going to show up back behind this sky. So before that gets too set, maybe go over the bottom part one more time. Make it a little bit brighter. Then I'm going to take this and mix in a little fuzz here, a little bit of orange to it. Still keeping it pretty wet, pretty loose, but I'll start to lay that orange just above the yellow. Let it blend where those two meet. So this is how to paint a sunset. Kind of. Get a little more water, get a little more orange, and get a little touch of this red in there. See if I can make a slightly stronger color. I'm actually doing this wrong, but if the sun was there, it would happen kind of like this. A little more red. So I'm painting on Canson Edition paper, which is printmaking paper. Got a little more red now. And in this, I'm not going to necessarily think like they actually have. It's all just starting to get washed in. Got a paper towel here so I can kind of clean this off. I can dab it in the water, clean that off, and I can pull up and across those bands that I was painting to blend. I can pull down to blend them as well. But for the most part, that's going to get all of this started. I might take just a little more brighter yellow and go back maybe just a little bit behind the head, a little bit right back in there, just to give it a little more punch of color, those very bottom parts. A little extra brightness. I'm not trying to paint this whole thing in one shot. That is a common mistake. Build it up. Get it little by little, and it will work. It's like a formula. It'll work most of the time if you do it that way. All right, so that's kind of the first part. And I'm going to let that dry for a second, and then we'll get back to kind of blocking in the tones for some of the other parts. All right, so I've got my second wash to put in now. I am going to use a little bit of this transparent acrylic ink that is brown, Rob Umber. So I've got that here, and a little bit darker. I'm going to get a little bit of water on here. I am going to use this to kind of block in a lot of tones here at the bottom of the picture, thinking that I want a lot of this to be pretty dark. In a watercolor style, you would probably go through and wet the paper first. I don't think it's as important in acrylic. So I'm going to let this kind of fade out as it goes up. So use more water and less ink, especially kind of like around the face. I think I'm going to keep some of those tones a little bit lighter. And block in some of this tower. It's going to take a couple washes, I think, to get it down to where I want it. Try not to let anything dry too long. If it does, we can keep painting on top if we need to change anything. Kind of like a building here with some things and some junk that I'm trying to build up, and then try to put another figure for him to fight somewhere in the back, kind of mysterious. We don't know who it is. We don't know anything about them, really. If I want to try to work it out, I can use some water, use my finger to pull a little bit of that off. There's certain places down here that I know are more in shadow. So I'm going to go through and give those maybe a second hit of this darker color. It may have been better to do this, my color comp and my study that I did for compositional layout. A lot of this ended up being like a blue-gray. That maybe have been a better choice for some of the colors that I used on that, but it'll be fine. Clean this off, and I can kind of pull a stroke up here and just soften some of that, especially on the edges. My idea was that some of this arm, like the hand, might get a little bit of light. Some of this arm might actually be a little bit darker down at the bottom. As long as I keep building this up in layers, it should be fine. So I'm going to keep going.